Welcome to the hidden corners where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind.
Welcome to the Wolfman Chronicles. This is Chapter 11 of Book 8, Episode 101. It's Thailand. Werewolves and Destiny. Too soon, the moon reached its peak. Midnight had arrived. Jack stood alone at the water's edge, barefoot, bare-chested, wearing only the black linen trousers common in Thailand. The air was still. Even the forest held its breath. A pale fog clung to the jungle floor, curling around the roots and the stones as if summoned by Sangwat's will. The moon, full and bright, cast a cold silver reflection over the black surface of the pool. It was a sacred place set behind the temple, encircled by ancient stones that had watched centuries of blood and worship. He heard the rustle before he saw it. Sangwat emerged from the trees like smoke given form, robed in crimson silk embroidered with gold serpents. His eyes gleamed with anticipation, his grin thin as a knife's edge. "You came," Sangwat said, spreading his arms. "The wolf, at last, returns to the mirror." Jack's voice was steady. "You wanted the gift. I'm here to give it. But you made a deal. All the girls will be released and the trafficking will end." Sangwat chuckled. "You make it sound so solemn. The girls, they mean nothing to me." He snapped his fingers and 4 men stepped out of the darkness. Each man held a rope with a dozen or more girls, their hands tied, walking in single file. "How do I know this is all there is?" Jack's voice reverberated across the water. "How do I know you won't continue to gather more?" Sangwat drew a long knife from the sash at his waist. He held up his arm, the crimson robe falling back, exposing his thin arm. "I give you my word, in blood." And without hesitation, he drew the knife across his flesh. Blood spilled freely, dark and rich, dripping into the black water of the pool. "My blood, your promise. Your blood, my transformation." Still holding the knife, he dropped to his knees. With a shaking hand, he dipped 2 fingers into his bleeding arm and drew a symbol of blood in the water, a spiral that dissolved into ripples. "The pool bears witness," he murmured. "This temple, the sacred ground, the ancestors who came before, let them hear my oath. I will keep my promise. The captives will be released tonight. My network will be dissolved. If I break this vow," he looked up, eyes hollow and sincere, "may your curse end my life." Jack studied him. There was something in Sangwat's face now, something stripped bare, a humility that looked real. "Then I will keep my end," Jack said. "You'll feel the bite. But the power you seek, that's up to you to earn. Becoming a wolf isn't about fear or fury." He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "It's about honor, protection." And then, in one swift motion, Jack shifted, bones cracking, flesh rippling, fur exploding from his skin. His body stretched into his other form, and he stood before Sangwat as the beast, golden-eyed, majestic, terrible. Sangwat stepped forward slowly, never breaking eye contact. "I've prepared for this moment, and now I will become a god." Suddenly the pool shimmered, its surface rippling not with water, But with mirrored illusion, another Jack emerged from the opposite side, and then another, circling to the left. 3 wolves, eyes glowing gold, teeth flashing in the moonlight. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, like shadows choreographed to confuse. Sang-Wat stepped back, his face a mask of confusion. As he glanced at each one circling and winding around each other, he could no longer determine which wolf was Jack. This isn't real. He turned in a slow circle, eyes flicking from one to the other. No, I've studied your scent, your gait. This isn't real. For the first time, there was doubt behind his eyes. He snarled and leaping toward Jack with a dagger drawn, not a weapon of steel, but of obsidian, enchanted and humming with cursed energy. Jack pivoted, dodging the blade by inches, and lunged, not to kill, but to bite. His teeth sank deep into Sang-Wat's shoulder, the blood spilled hot and fast. Sang-Wat screamed, staggering back, eyes wide with ecstasy and horror. Suddenly, Sasha sprang forward, sinking her long canine teeth deep into Sang-Wat's shoulder and tearing part of the flesh away with it. Julian followed a heartbeat later, jaws snapping, claws raking, and in seconds, what had been a ceremonial pact turned into a violent reckoning as the 3 wolves descended, fur and fury, growls and blood, on the man who thought himself invincible. "Stop!" Sang-Wat cried, thrashing beneath the onslaught. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." But the wolves did not stop. All of his illusions, all of his tricks, could not save him now, because this was not a negotiation or an initiation. This was justice. The transformation that Sang-Wat expected never came. "What have you done?" he screamed. The temple echoed with his last cries. And when the silence returned, the reflection pool shimmered, undisturbed, as if the jungle itself had accepted the offering. The sun rose slowly over the jungle canopy as dozens of girls, frightened but free, were being gently ushered into waiting trucks by the Royal Thai Police and the international aid workers. Dara and Alexei coordinated with officials and made sure that none of Sang-Wat's men escaped. They were led, one by one, from the inner chambers of the temple in handcuffs. Julian sat cross-legged near the temple steps, leaning against a stone pillar and breathing in the sunrise, his body still aching from the transformation. Jack's prior wounds were stitched and bandaged, and for the first time in days, he allowed himself a breath of relief. Sang-Wat's empire, his network of cruelty and illusion, was dismantled. He was gone, but the weight of victory felt hollow. "I thought I'd feel more triumphant," Julian said quietly. "We just dismantled one of the biggest trafficking rings in Southeast Asia." "You'd think that would be enough," Jack replied, "but it's not. Not really. Not when there's more out there just like him. Well, maybe not exactly like him, but monsters nonetheless," Julian replied. They watched as one of the girls, no older than 10, stared out the back of the transport truck, her eyes wide with a haunted 1,000-yard stare. She clutched the edge of the bench with both hands and looked into the trees. Sasha sat down on the step next to Jack. She turned to face him, her brow furrowed. "You did what no government could, what no UN task force could. You stopped a crazed madman, Jack." "Yeah, but there's always someone else waiting to take the throne," he whispered back to her. Dara approached, her boots crunching in the gravel. "Interpol is already launching investigations based on what we found here. There'll be a ripple effect." "Ripples won't stop the tide," Jack muttered. There was a long pause. Then Nadia spoke from the edge of the courtyard where she'd been sitting beside a young girl, comforting her. "You can't stop the whole ocean," she said, "but if you save even one person from drowning, isn't it worth it?" Her voice cut through the silence like sunlight through fog. Jack looked around at the group: Sasha, Julian, Miguel, Alexei, Dara, Nadia. Family. "We can't save the world," Jack said quietly, "but we can make it a little harder for evil to hide." Julian cracked a smile. "Sounds like the beginning of our next mission." They all chuckled softly. The moment heavy, yet strangely hopeful. The morning air was warm now, and somewhere beyond the trees, birds began to sing again. Now they had won this battle, but the war wasn't over, and they would not turn away. The ferry docked at Koh Rong Island just after sunset, its hull cutting through the turquoise waters with a soft hum. The sky was brushed in hues of tangerine and lavender, the sea calm beneath it, serene as if holding its breath. Rachel stood on the dock, scanning the horizon with anxious eyes, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and hope. She had tried to stay busy helping David at the island resort, pouring drinks for tourists, smiling through the long days. But her thoughts had always been on the others, her new family. When she spotted the group stepping off the ferry, bruised, tired, her breath hitched in her throat. Then it released in a choked sob. She ran. "Jack!" Rachel reached them in seconds, throwing her arms around Sasha first, then Nadia, then Jack, burying her face in his chest as the tears came in a flood. "You're back," she whispered. "You're all back." Jack wrapped his arms around her gently, his movements still stiff from healing wounds. "We're here, kiddo," he said softly. "We're okay." Miguel stepped up beside them, and Rachel turned to him too, wrapping him in a fierce hug. "Don't scare me like that again," she mumbled into his shoulder. "No promises," Miguel said with a small smile. Julian roughed her hair as he passed. "You held down the fort like a pro. David said you ran the place." Rachel laughed through her tears, wiping at her cheeks. "Yeah, well, I prayed a lot." The team gathered on the shore, quiet, tired, but alive. Behind them, the jungle of Thailand felt like a dream that they'd barely escaped. In front of them, the familiar pulse of waves lapping at the sand felt like home. They walked together down the beach, toward the bungalows, lit warmly with lanterns. Tonight there would be food, laughter, and rest. For the first time in weeks, peace. Rachel held Jack's hand a little longer before letting go, because deep down she knew that peace for this family was never permanent. Still, for now, it was enough. Yeah, that night there was celebration, a quiet one, filled with freshly grilled fish, island fruit, and cold bottles of beer. They sat on woven mats beneath the stars, laughter floating through the warm air like smoke from the nearby torches. Music drifted from David's old radio, and for just a few hours they allowed themselves to breathe freely. Rachel curled up beside Sasha, head on her shoulder. Julian told a ghost story that had even Alexei snorting into his drink. But beneath the easy smiles and the well-earned laughter, there was a shared understanding none dared to voice aloud. This war wasn't over. Kamarov and Sangwat, they were only men, powerful, twisted, and dangerous, but only men. The machine that had forged them was still out there. Jack stared into the dark beyond the shoreline where the ocean met the sky in an endless horizon. He felt Sasha's hand find his and give it a squeeze. Nadia sat at the edge of the veranda, staring out at the sea. She was quiet, letting her thoughts carry her far away to the warmth of Igor's embrace. She missed him. "What do you think happens next?" Julian asked softly. Jack looked at the sea. "I think the tide rolls back in," he said, "and we'll be ready when it does." Together, they would face whatever came next. The soft hush of the waves whispered against the shore outside of Nadia's bungalow. Inside, the pale morning light filtered through the slatted windows and danced along the white walls. The air smelled of salt and jasmine and mango trees warmed by the sun. Nadia stood in front of the small mirror mounted above the sink. She had just slipped into her bathing suit, the one that she'd worn a dozen times on the island. But this time, it fit differently. She stared at her reflection, her fingers unconsciously tracing the subtle curve of her lower belly. The bulge was small, barely noticeable to anyone else, but to her it was monumental. She turned sideways, pressing her hand gently against her abdomen, feeling a life stirring inside her that no one yet knew about. Not even Sasha, not Jack, not Rachel. Her heart ached as she thought of Igor. She missed him with a bone-deep ache, one that neither time nor distance had managed to dull. Yeah, he would have loved this place, the peace, the freedom, the way the jungle wrapped around the sea like an ancient secret. She imagined him beside her, a hand on her belly, a fierce promise in his eyes. Instead, all she had were memories and the swelling hope of the child that they'd created. A quiet knock came from the door. Nadia quickly wiped at her eyes and slipped a light cover over her shoulders. "Come in," she called. It was Rachel, carrying a tray with 2 coconuts and a plate of sliced fruit. "I thought you might want breakfast in here," she said with a soft smile. "You didn't come to the beach this morning." "Thanks," Nadia said, her voice steadier than she felt. Rachel placed the tray down and studied her for a moment. "Are you okay?" Nadia hesitated, then nodded. "Just processing." Rachel nodded slowly as if she understood more than she let on. "You'd done so much for all those girls, for all of us." Nadia sat on the edge of the bed, a piece of the papaya untouched in her hand. Her mind returned to the temple, to the fear that she had seen in the eyes of the children, and the fire in her own chest. Rage and determination twisted together like roots in the dark. This baby wasn't just a secret. It was fuel. Every girl they rescued, every trafficker they stopped, it wasn't just a mission anymore, it was a promise. A promise that her child would never grow up in a world that turned its back on the vulnerable. That if she had any say in it, no more children would be stolen in the night. "Hey girl, let's go swimming. I'll race you to the water." Rachel jumped up with excitement, a big smile on her face. "That's what I'm talking about," she laughed. That evening, as the sky turned a deep violet and the torches were lit round the beachside fire pit, Nadia stepped into the golden glow. The others, they were already there, Jack, Sasha, Julian, Miguel, Rachel, laughing over bowls of grilled shrimp and pineapple, their faces relaxed for the first time in days. She cleared her throat. "I have something to tell you," she said, louder than she intended. The laughter stopped. Heads turned. They stared at her, silence hovering in the humid air. "I'm going to have a baby." There was a split second where no one moved, just the waves behind them and the crackle of the fire. Then Sasha gasped audibly, standing so quickly her chair tumbled backwards. She rushed forward, wrapping Nadia in a fierce hug, her eyes glistening with tears. Rachel let out a squeal, bouncing on her heels. "What? "Oh my God, Nadia, that's amazing." She threw her arms around them both. Jack looked stunned, blinking like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. "You're serious?" he said. "You're really—" "Yes," Nadia nodded, overwhelmed but smiling. "I didn't want to say anything until I knew for sure." Jack approached quietly and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You could have told us," he said gently. "You're not alone." Miguel's expression was unreadable for a moment. Then he stepped forward and touched Nadia's belly with a soft reverence. "We've got your back, little one," he said. "You're going to be born into one weird and wild family." Julian laughed. "Just wait till Juanita hears about this. She'll be on the next plane out here. And Kat and Usko and the twins, why, you're going to need a bigger house, Jack." Nadia looked around at them, this odd, beautiful, battle-scarred family, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight alone. She was carrying hope. The days that followed Nadia's announcement took on a different energy. The tension that had wrapped around the group like a coiled wire began to ease, replaced by moments of laughter, long walks on the beach, and shared meals beneath swaying palms. And yet, under the surface, something else stirred, something deeper and stronger. A realization that they were no longer a ragtag band of freedom fighters scraping together plans. They were becoming something more, a family with a mission. Jack began to think in terms of future rather than just survival. Watching Nadia with her hands on her belly, he felt something shift inside of him. A need to protect, not just the child she carried, but the life the child would inherit. Sasha took on a new calmness. Her fierceness remained, but it was wrapped in tenderness now. She hovered near Nadia without smothering her, always watching, always ready. Rachel threw herself into the idea of becoming a big sister. She made Nadia tea in the mornings, rubbed her shoulders in the evenings, and peppered her with baby name suggestions every chance she got. The family, they didn't talk much about their next mission. Not yet. But the fire still burned in each of them, stronger now. It was sharper and focused. Because with Nadia's pregnancy came clarity. They weren't just fighting monsters anymore. No, they were building something worth protecting. Something that would last. One evening, just after the sun had dipped beneath the horizon and the sky was painted with stars, the group gathered again around the fire pit. This time, there were no secrets to be shared, only dreams. Jack leaned back on his elbows in the sand, watching the waves roll in. What if we didn't go back to Alaska?" he said, his voice casual but loaded with implication. Rachel's eyebrows lifted. You're kidding, right?" Nadia looked up from her cup of tea, the firelight casting warm gold across her sky. "I've been thinking the same thing," she said slowly. "I want to stay, at least for a while. I want to work with Destiny Rescue and help rebuild. There's still so much to do." Sasha turned to look at Jack, her expression unreadable. "You think we've outgrown Alaska?" Jack hesitated. "Well, maybe not outgrown, but maybe we're needed here right now, and there's something about this place. It's like it called out to us." Miguel stared into the fire, arms crossed over his chest. "You've forgotten something," he said quietly. "Alaska still has its own stories, its own monsters, and we're still tied to them." Jack nodded. "I know. The Mavka, and everything we left behind, Grizzly and Rosa. I'm not saying we abandon them. I'm just thinking, maybe we build something here, a second home, a safe house, somewhere we can base operations when we're working in this region." Sasha's eyes softened. "Best of both worlds?" Julian grinned. "Now you're talking. I'll start drawing up blueprints tomorrow." Rachel looked from face to face. So we'd go back and forth, just like dual lives? Jack looked at her, serious now. We've always lived dual lives, Rachel. This just makes it official. They stayed at the fire late into the night, sketching out dreams with sticks in the sand. A training facility, a clinic, housing for rescued girls, a quiet bay with watchtowers and a security system hidden in the trees. Nadia imagined raising her child here, surrounded by hope and healing instead of shadows and secrets. By the time the fire burned low, the decision had been made. They wouldn't choose between Alaska and Asia. They would live in both. And from both places they would continue the fight, because for every child stolen in the night, there needed to be a wolf in the shadows, waiting. This was their destiny.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and I hope you'll join us next week for another installment of the Wolfman Chronicles. And until then, have a great week, everyone.